Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to wait a couple extra minutes while we get started to let some folks pop into the session. My name is Kelsey Watt. I am a career coach for the J.P. Carey School of Business, and I'll be moderating our session. And in just a few moments, I will introduce our presenter and go over some housekeeping items for the session. Great. So it looks like we have a few more folks joining us. Thank you for swinging by the Career Interest Community Business Trends presentation. As I mentioned, my name is Kelsey Watt. I'll be moderating the session. I work with J.P. Carey Career Management and Employer Engagement. A few housekeeping items before I introduce our presenter and we get started. This session is part of 23 sessions for our International Student Career Development Summer Series. So thank you for joining us for this session. We have a lot of really great sessions and you're able to pick whichever ones are of interest to you. I'm going to put a link in the chat with the full lineup of all of the sessions. They are running in May. If there's a session that you missed in the lineup from yesterday, perhaps, don't worry. We are going to run these again in June and July. You are welcome to use the chat function at any point in time during our presentation to ask questions. You are also welcome. I've given you the ability to unmute yourself. So if you do have a question, you're welcome to ask to unmute yourself. But I do ask that while you're watching the presentation, you keep yourself on mute and keep your video muted, unless of course you want to ask a question. Yeah, so I will introduce our presenter, who is Toni Rohr. She is the Director of Career Management for the J.P. Carey School of Business. So thank you, Toni, for being with us.
Great. Thank you, Kelsey, and welcome everyone. Glad to have everyone in the room. I love for sessions to be more interactive, so if you do want to ask a question, feel free to jump in. I cannot see everyone's, small little picture or name. So if you want to jump in, you just got to be a little bit loud. Otherwise, feel free in your functions to use the raise hand or put something in chat for sure. But would love for it to be more interactive if possible. I will save some time at the end for questions. So if you want to wait until the end, that's fine as well. So as Kelsey mentioned, I'm currently the Director for Career Management at the J.P. Carey School of Business. I started in higher ed career services more than 20 years ago. I have worked at small, all-women's liberal arts colleges. I worked with the Duke MBA program. I started at ASU over 9 years ago and came to ASU through the broader ASU Career Services Office, CPDS, and about 6 years ago moved over to the business school. So I've been with W.P. Carey for a little over 6 years. For 5 years, I was the supply chain career coach for the full-time MBA program. And just about a year ago, took on the role of supervising all of our career coaching teams. So at W.P. Carey, we have over 15,000 students in the business school. We have a team of coaches that Kelsey is on that work with our undergraduate students. We also have a separate team of coaches that works with our specialized masters and another team of coaches that work with our MBA platforms. So my job then is to oversee all of those teams and kind of keep us all on track and make sure we're being consistent in our services in career. So today, as part of this International Student Seminar Series, we have part of the series is to talk about communities of interest. And since we're in the business school, we're going to be talking about business trends. So today, what I want to go over with you in the short time that we have is to talk a little bit about the current market updates and what's happening during COVID and what we might anticipate post-COVID, what that looks like in terms of hiring trends and what it, how that affects what you might be doing in your job search and what you should be thinking about, and then talking about some other data and resources for you. So thinking about the current market updates, you know, really it's been like the last 2 months that everything sort of happened. And as you know, things happened very quickly and continue to change daily. And so just in looking back, kind of what we saw in March and April was very quickly as things shut down, a lot of companies laid people off or had to let people go. The unemployment rate is, I think the last I saw, about 15% right now. Companies were making furloughs, meaning they were asking people to work less amount of days, but then also, you know, having the pay cut, or they were just cutting salaries in order to maintain workers and kind of keep people on, but be able to pay them. And so a lot of those things shifted very quickly for companies. The other thing that impacted then were their hiring processes. And so, as you know, March and April are kind of big months for us with our students for securing internships. Very quickly, companies canceled. Some companies canceled their internships. Other companies held off a little bit and made some decisions to move to the remote work. We didn't see quite as many rescinded full-time offers. I would say personally, we saw more internships canceled, which makes sense considering, you know, an internship is a short-term project versus bringing someone on full-time. Some of the things we saw in the full-time hiring process were companies kind of putting some things on hold, really to see what was happening. And then with our students who had maybe just graduated in this month, some companies have pushed the start dates back. Some companies have transitioned to starting remotely. And then companies that were in the hiring process or anticipating hiring, a lot of them have just put that on hold to see what's happening. I saw just this morning some data coming out of LinkedIn that shows from their charts and their data that they've collected that they feel like the decline of job postings has stabilized. So it feels like we've kind of gone through the worst part of that, and then maybe from here it'll be slower, but hopefully on the rise. So I know that in the news, there's a lot of doom and gloom, a lot of negative stuff coming out of that. But I will tell you personally, in our office, we still see people getting jobs every day, getting offers. So there are things that are still happening. So if you are continuing to either look for an internship or a full-time job right now, I think this information is helpful so that you know how to build your strategy. And also, if you're thinking longer term, like maybe for next year, an internship, or you're graduating next year, really to keep in mind what's happening in the market and how you develop your strategy around that. So certainly right now, based off of, you know, COVID and the shutdowns and what's been happening, there are some industries that are not doing well. So industries that have been hit pretty hard. I think you could probably guess, you know, what those are without me telling you, but certainly travel and tourism, because obviously we're not really allowed to travel so much. the airlines, the cruise ships, like all of those things. Leisure, hospitality, hotels, you know, been hit really hard. I know Airbnb is another one that's been hit really hard. So some of those things, along with entertainment. You know, I think one thing that's really interesting about a market like this, when things get really tough, it also breeds a lot of innovation. So back in the market crash of 2008, if you've seen some of those articles about the companies that came out of that, it was a lot of the kind of shared economy jobs like Uber and those types of things. So I'm noticing, like with entertainment, a lot of companies are shut down, like movie theaters, but I also saw that they've gotten innovative and they're starting to do kind of drive-in theaters even in their parking lots. So kind of an interesting twist on that. Other industries, certainly the sports has taken a big hit just with, and if you think about sports teams and all of the different industries that they touch, the venues, the products, the services, all of those have, you know, not doing well. And oil and gas, we know, just by knowing what gas prices are right now, we know that's actually not doing well. But if we think about, you know, what's not doing well, we also have to think about what industries are growing right now. And as you're thinking about your own job search strategy, you really want to think about where you're putting yourself. And if your goal is to get into one of those industries that are not doing well right now, you might think about how to pivot and maybe have maybe a shorter term goal for right now, or maybe a kind of stepping stone to get to your larger goal farther down the line when things might stabilize a little bit more. So certainly lots of growth happening in the large tech companies. It doesn't mean every part of their business though, so you have to really dig in and make sure you understand what parts of those companies are doing well. In the last 3 weeks, I've had at least 5 alumni reach out and tell me they've all switched jobs, and all of them have gone to the large tech companies like Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. So there are lots of pieces of those companies that are doing well. Certainly companies that offer products for remote work. Zoom is going crazy. Hopefully you all saw the announcement that they're actually opening some job roles in the Phoenix area. So lots of those remote work like Microsoft Teams and some of the Google products, online learning communities. You know, think about just ASU as one institution, and we're using Zoom all day long. You know, what did they say? 44,000 classes on Zoom. Like, it's amazing. And that's just one university. I have 2 high school kids. They use Google Classroom in the public schools. So, you know, those companies are going to have to ramp up as well, because even as things stabilize and open up, we're not going to go back to necessarily everything that we were doing before. I know a lot of higher ed and public schools and other schools, K-12, are going to have to think about how to kind of have this hybrid learning opportunity. Certainly mobile commerce, the no-touch technology and payment. If you've gotten food anywhere or bought things anywhere recently, you've seen that popping up. Of course, food delivery, the online grocery giants, big opportunities there. And then certainly, you know, digital streaming, entertainment. Of course, if people have to be at home, they need some entertainment. So I guess that's one piece of entertainment that actually is growing. And then healthcare and healthcare supply companies. And again, it's certain parts of the business. Other pieces of healthcare, these elective surgery, elective pieces aren't maybe growing as much. So you really have to dig into the information, and I'll talk about a few resources at the end, so that you understand what's happening in the market and how that's changing and shifting, so that you know how to build your strategy for your job search. Which leads me to the next point of what are the things that you need to be doing in your job search. So as Kelsey mentioned, this series has a lot of workshops that are available for you to take advantage of. And all of those workshops are really built off of these things that you need to be doing in the market now. So I put at the top there, definitely attending the seminars in this series can really help you kind of think about that. One thing that we're really working with students on the coaching side is thinking through some backup plans. So you might have come in to ASU with an idea of what you want to do, but nobody could have predicted what's happening now. So you might need to shift. You might need to have some multiple options. And specifically, yesterday, one of our coaches, April, did a workshop on return to home country for international students. And that's a really big part of your strategy and should be a part of your plan that you're doing in parallel with other job searches you might be doing in the US. And so if you missed that session, the next time it comes back around, I highly recommend that you take advantage of that. But always having kind of multiple backup plans, which might look like, you know, different industries. So maybe you had the idea that you wanted to go into marketing and you wanted to go into hospitality, but it's not looking so great right now. Maybe you make a bit of a pivot, have a backup plan to do marketing in another industry, and then further down the line, pivot to your goal there. With a lot of things that are happening in the market, what we see is with people being laid off or furloughed or, you know, out of work, what that does is it floods the market with applicants. And so even more than usual, you need to be able to stand out in a crowded market. And so if you're not doing an internship this summer or you're not working right now, certainly taking an inventory of your skills and seeing if there are other things you can add to that make you more marketable. Certainly a lot of the growth is around technology, so being really familiar with that. LinkedIn Learning offers badges and different things. I have the link there for the ASU for You, which offers some different courses and upskilling that might help. Certainly already talked about other sectors that are ramping up and have needs, so really kind of considering that. And then some of the other sessions in this series talk about interviewing and networking, and the added complexity to that is that we're doing everything virtually. So although the content might be the same, sort of the way you structure how you do your networking and how you do your interviewing and the things that you need to think about when you're doing it online are a little bit different. And then make sure that you're revising your marketing materials. I know one of the series is on LinkedIn, you know, really making sure that you're targeting what you want, that you have the right skills highlighted on those marketing materials so that you can really stand out in the market. And I know regardless, excuse me, regardless of what school you are a part of at ASU, either the engineering school has a career center, the business school has a career center, and then of course ASU-wide CPDS is there. So you have access to career coaching no matter, you know, what college you're at the university. So highly recommend that you take advantage of that. So let's talk a little bit about business and what kind of roles are available. What does it look like as an outlook? I have here some information from US News and World Report. This is their 2020 Best Business Jobs list. I only put here kind of the top 10. So some of these, like the first one, statistician or the mathematician, might require a master's degree, but the majority of these on the list require a bachelor's degree. And so these are kind of top companies that have growth, that have a good outlook. I put the link to the article at the bottom because the list of top jobs is really helpful, and it will also give you kind of an average salary and the number of jobs and kind of outlook, so you can take a look at that. So if you're considering business, but you're not really sure, you know, what are some good areas to go into function-wise, this is something you could consider. Certainly things around finance, you see a lot of finance on there. And if you think about what's happening in the market and that companies really need to kind of consider the bottom line, certainly a financial manager, accountant role, those are all very important right now. I've read a lot about investment management actually doing well right now. So financial advisor and working with people on their investments could be a good thing to kind of think about. And then, you know, other things around operations, kind of not reflected here. It may be considered more tech focused, but lots of kind of data analysis is really a part of everything that is in business right now. So I recommend you take a look once you get the PowerPoint. I know these will be emailed out. The article is great to kind of take a look at some of those and help you see where some of that growth is. And then more specifically, kind of looking at W.P. Carey as a business school. And W.P. Carey is one of the largest business schools in the whole country. So a lot of schools do look to W.P. Carey to see what kind of trends are coming out of our school. I listed here sort of our largest undergrad business majors: accountancy, communication, finance, supply chain, sports and media studies, and marketing. So that's something to consider. But we do have about 30 majors in the business school. And you don't just have to be in the business school to work in business, obviously. You know, there are a lot of other majors at ASU that are good fits going into different types of business. On the graduate side, we have, I mentioned specialized masters. We have 8 specialized master's programs. And actually in the coming year, it will be more because we're launching some online degrees as well. And those usually, the specialized master's is a function in its degree. So we have a master's in finance, a master's in business analytics, information systems management, global logistics, master's in real estate development, and I'm not sure what else. We have lots. So those are something to consider as well if you're an undergraduate student and you're thinking about kind of that upskilling and maybe going to another degree. And then of course we have our MBA platforms as well. In our full-time MBA, we have our most popular kind of concentrations are supply chain, marketing, and finance. I have listed here at the bottom of the slide, W.P. Carey has more than 40 business-related clubs and organizations. So that's in addition to all of the thousands of clubs and orgs at ASU, but specifically 40 in the business school, about 40 for business students. And then I have 2 links here. One is the Fast Facts, which we have for each of our undergraduate majors. And it includes average salary, and that's for W.P. Carey students, as well as job titles and top employers. So if you are kind of considering any of those majors, or even if you're considering, say, a job in finance and you're not in that major, you might want to go in there and kind of see what the outlook looks like, what kind of job titles and companies hire those students. We have similar information on the graduate side. So those career snapshots, what to say, are for the graduate program. So we have one for each of our specialized master's program, as well as one for each of our concentrations within the MBA platform. And those list out skills that you need in those function areas, as well as job titles and top employers. So if you're interested in seeing who hires business students out of ASU, those are a good place to go and take a look. In thinking about business and business jobs, also took a look at Handshake to see what kind of scope we're talking about there. So the information on this screen is really from me going into the job function in Handshake and searching, keyword searching the terms. So with finance, marketing, accounting, management, you could see had a lot. over almost 4,000 jobs listed in Handshake with management in the title. So if you are in one of those majors that's really broad, like a business management, business administration, a communications degree, it can be a little bit overwhelming when you're doing a job search for something like management. You might want to then think about how you're going to narrow that down. I think the industry is a good way to narrow some of that down. And again, if you're thinking strategically, you'll think about some of those industries that are doing well. I know like retail right now, e-commerce doing well, but you know, the standalone stores not doing so well. So, you know, if you were thinking retail management, then you might want to think about how you could pivot and do some kind of maybe technology retail or something like that. So communications also really broad, and you can see the function areas that are narrower, like supply chain or finance. You'll get to narrow in on the jobs there. But for all of these, which kind of align with some of our top majors, there were still internships and lots of job postings in Handshake. So definitely make sure that you're utilizing Handshake as a resource. There's a lot of great research information that you can do in Handshake, outreach, networking, and then of course the job board is really robust. So figuring out how to narrow down with the filters, how to get what you're looking for, but really utilizing that. And in order to, you know, really take advantage of Handshake as a system, you really should make sure that you have a well-written, preferably coach-reviewed resume in the system that is visible to companies, so that you're able to apply for these roles, but also so that companies can reach out if they find you that way. And lastly, wanted to talk a little bit about some of the resources and the idea about the business of business. And so, you know, business is a really broad term, and, you know, almost anyone who's working could say they're working in business, right? If you're working for an organization or a company, you're in business. But the way that we think about business is really sort of the structure of the organization and how they're run and how those companies really fit into the bigger ecosystem of the industry and how that's affected by the economy and the government and regulations. And so really, if you want to be in business and you want to understand what's happening and you want to be able to talk about that when you're networking, when you're interviewing, when you're building your strategy, then you really should be paying attention to all of the business news. So I listed a few resources here. Certainly is not exhaustive. And, you know, if I'm saying that you should be reading these daily, I don't mean that you should pick up the Wall Street Journal and read it front to back every day. But really, we are in this thing called the attention economy, where there's so much information coming at us, you know, we don't often know what to pay attention to. And so for you, if you can pick a few resources that you really trust, so these on the screen, I will say we trust for good business news. And you subscribe to their email newsletters. You know, usually those will come daily, sometimes weekly. And if you get that in your inbox and just make it a habit of opening those up and scanning the headlines and sort of seeing what's happening, it will help you kind of get a better sense of things in a broader term of the market and what's happening. And so often when students are preparing their, you know, kind of job search strategy or preparing for an interview or networking, they're really just looking at a small slice of information at the company level, right? So if you're interested in Amazon, then a lot of people will only do their research on Amazon as a company and what the company looks like. But in fact, there are so many other things that are affecting Amazon's business that are happening in the market, in the economy, in the world, that, you know, understanding those pieces of it really helps give you a broader view of business in general. So the Wall Street Journal, I believe you can access that for free through the library, and the ASU library has an amazing amount of resources. The Phoenix Business Journal you can get online through the library, lots of databases. So that would be another resource I would recommend. Poets and Quants is something that we use regularly in the business school, either through, you know, because of admissions, because of rankings, because of just information, and it's all about kind of business school. So it's really helpful to understand what's happening at other business schools and how that's affecting how we react to the market and what's happening as well. Harvard Business Review is a great resource. They have different email newsletters you can subscribe to, as well as The Economist and the Financial Times. So certainly, again, not an exhaustive list. There are lots of others. If anyone has other resources for business they think are great, feel free to pop them in the chat function and other people can see those as well. But for now, that is all that I have today, and I would love it if people had some questions. I do also have, besides Kelsey, I also have a couple other coaches in the session today. So, you know, certainly we could answer some questions for you if you want to do that.
So feel free, if you do have questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask questions or navigate to the chat, which most likely is on the bottom of your screen and says chat, to ask us any questions about what's happening in business. Well, here's one. I have a question for startups. How is the current scenario now?
Yeah, great question. I have one answer for every question, and the answer is it depends, right? So I would say it depends on what kind of startup it is, right? So, you know, I referenced 2008 and some of the innovative companies that came out of that scenario, and I think the same thing is happening right now. Just a little bit different. So in 2008, it was this financial crisis. And what we really saw, a lot of startups that came out of that was this shared economy, right? Because the purpose for that was to share the price and the cost of things and make things cheaper for people in a time when money was tough, right? And so if you think about what's happening now, it's not necessarily the same thing, right? So money's tough for people who may have lost their jobs, but for the rest of us who, you know, are continuing to work, that's not the issue. It really is more this idea of everything being online, everything needing social distancing, kind of these cleanliness and health issues. And so if you think about that and what the challenges are that we're facing right now, I would say any company that's a startup that is solving one of those problems is probably going to do well, right? That's where people want to invest the money because they know it's needed. So if someone has this great idea for a startup that's around, you know, sports, you know, I could see that struggling a bit right now. But if someone has a great idea and a new company that, like, I don't know, maybe people can throw some ideas out there. Like I've seen lots of new products coming out. Even, you know, high school student, I think there was a high school student in Washington who developed some tracking system for the virus that, you know, and he turned down $8 million from ads or something like that because he wanted to keep his app ad free. So I think when you think about startups and that type of thing, and whether or not you want to do a startup or you want to get involved in one, think about what are the problems and is this startup solving that problem? And I think those are the ones that you'll see some growth on. A question in here, so hopefully we answered that question. Is it realistic to expect to be able to stay in the greater Phoenix area when looking for new jobs? Should we broaden our job search outside of Phoenix, even if you want to stay here? That is a really great question. And I would say two things. One, I would say, you know, we're really lucky to be in the greater Phoenix area because it's big, right? You know, we're the 5th largest city in the country. So we have that going for us. When I work with students and they ask about staying in Phoenix, I say the challenge is that we have a little of everything, but not a lot of one thing, right? So we tend to not be like a mecca for one particular sector or industry, but we don't have like a ton of corporate headquarters here. So in the business realm, that can be challenging sometimes because a lot of times, especially for new grads or if you're in a leadership development program, the companies want you to be at the corporate headquarters. But that being said, you know, the fact that we are kind of diversified in the industries here, that's a plus. So if you think about New York being like a finance mecca in 2008 or, you know, back in 2001 with 9/11, I actually worked at the Duke MBA at the time. And one of our biggest areas of recruiting was investment banking, you know, and that was hit really hard. So the nice thing about Phoenix is there is a diversity of industries that you could target. And, you know, you've probably seen over the last few years that Phoenix has become a hotspot for a lot of tech companies. But again, maybe not their headquarters, but they're building satellite offices in different kind of tech sectors. So it does offer a lot of jobs depending on what you're looking for. So that being said, I think Phoenix is a great area. There is a lot of opportunity here, but a good strategy has backup plans, right? So to me, we have kind of a career action plan that has 3 dimensions to it. One is your function, so the job role that you want. One is the industry, and then the other is location. And I always say that you need to kind of expand on those. If you just have one function, one industry, one location that you're looking at, it's sort of, you know, that saying, putting all your eggs in one basket, meaning you're relying on one thing to get you to your goal. And so a good backup plan would be to add an additional location or 2, right? And again, it doesn't mean forever if Phoenix is where you really want to be. But you really want to be at a big tech company, you're probably going to have to start somewhere else, right? So I would say build your backup plans, you know, work with a coach. I think it's a great thing to do, to go in and say, you know, here's my plan A, B, C. So it sort of depends on your goal, but I do think adding extra locations can really help with your strategy. So great, thanks. Looks like we have just a couple more minutes if anyone else has any questions.
All right, guys. Well, as I'll close this out. Feel free, if you do still have a question and pops into your head, you can still enter it in the chat. But wanted to thank you again for attending this session, and thank you, Tony, for really, really helpful information on business trends right now. So as we mentioned, this session is recorded and will be sent out to you. So you'll have the recording, you can refer to it again later. We will also send out the PowerPoint slides to you in a PDF so that you can look at some of these resources again. If you forget, what was that Poets and Quants thing called? You know, you'll be able to kind of take a look at those resources again. We are also going to send out in your email an evaluation, a survey for you to take to evaluate this session and the whole series. That feedback will be very helpful so that we can augment the session for the June and July series to make sure that they are really meeting students' needs. So thank you guys again for joining us. Remember, this is one of 23 webinars, so you're welcome to, you know, go to as many as you'd like. I'm putting in the chat just one last time the link to the rest of the seminars. All right. Thank you guys. Have a very good day.
Thank you.